Welcome to Cancer Talks, a podcast sharing stories of personal transformation and collective healing from people who have been touched by cancer. My name is Cheryl Buck, and I will be guiding today's conversation. Our guest, Sasha Soreff, is a dancer, performance maker, and creative community facilitator. These days, she leads empathy movement workshops that invite participants to explore grief in community with words and movement. On our first call, Sasha said, "It hits a primal place in me to take care of myself." I was especially moved by the way she communicated with all of her caregivers about exactly what kinds of support she needed at every point in her cancer journey. Hi, Sasha. Welcome to Cancer Talks.
Hi, Cheryl. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm really honored to be with you and let you share your story.
Thank you.
Let's start with, I just want to say that in Cancer Talks, the word I use is posit. I had to actually look it up, but it means that we assume as a fact that a cancer diagnosis is an opportunity for transformation, for personal transformation, and that after a cancer diagnosis, life will never be the same again, for the better. People say that it's the best thing that ever happened to them. And as I say, I'm not the same person I was before my cancer diagnosis. And well, the interesting thing in talking with you is that you had an opportunity, I think, almost 20 years ago, that had a similar effect on your life as a cancer diagnosis. You are a dancer, you're a choreographer, you're a transformational coach. I don't know what this next thing is, but a resonant movement facilitator. And you write about cancer and you paint. You paint, you're an artist and you paint your pain. The piece that I saw, it's exquisite in a very visceral way, the one piece that I saw. So you are a multi-layered human being, and I'm so honored to that you have agreed to talk with me and share your story.
Thank you. I'm really appreciating the chance to have this conversation with you.
Oh, good. Let's just start with, what is your cancer story?
Yeah, the context for my cancer story beginning was that I had to leave my home of 20 years. Earlier in the year, I was diagnosed and I went through a breakup earlier in the year. And I spent actually a couple months in the summer of 2016 staying on a friend's couch in the West Village of New York City.
Because that's classic.
It is, right? It's a total classic scene. Oh my gosh. New York City is an expensive city. And if one has foot issues and isn't good with going up and down stairs, it knocks out all the walk-ups.
Yes.
So, so I was looking for a place to live, and I was on this couch at my friend's. Although I have to tell you, it was like the entire West Village was my, extended backyard. It was a wonderful summer in a lot of ways.
Yes.
And I found a place, a sublet in Brooklyn to live, and I moved in on November 1st and got the ultrasound that then they said you need to get a biopsy. And I was pretty worried at this point. And I got the biopsy on November 8th in the same building. The medical facility that I went to was in the same building that Hillary Clinton's campaign headquarters was in Brooklyn.
Okay, that's random. Okay.
That's random. Yes, but it feels important to the story.
Okay. I'm listening.
Because that night as I awaited my biopsy results and was watching the results of the 2016 presidential election and getting up the next day and what transpired, I thought, I just kind of knew that I was going to be told I had cancer.
Yeah. Oh boy. Not a good day overall.
Yeah, really. In terms of not good days, I would count this amongst the highest for me.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
What kind of cancer did they say you had?
I had
Actually, can I say something here before you go?
Yeah.
Julia, who introduced us, one of the things that she told me about you right at the beginning is that you don't talk about, or you didn't. I don't know if you do now. So I might have asked a question that you might not want to answer, but you didn't really talk about what kind of cancer you had.
Yeah, I was very protective of myself around the diagnosis because I found that when I would share what kind of cancer I had, people had their own reactions based on their own life experience or that of a loved one. And I was so overwhelmed with the diagnosis and I was so scared. And when I had other people's interpretations of my experience or advice, well-intended advice and suggestions, or their projections, like their own wanting to know how I discovered it so that they could protect themselves. Like I just felt all these things coming at me.
Yeah, you felt them and they were real.
Yes.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. So I was very selective about who I shared it with. And when I did share it, I would say, I really don't want feedback. Like, here's the only thing I want to hear back from you.
Wow.
I want to hear that you're praying for me.
Wow. That's beautiful. That is actually quite extraordinary that you had the wherewithal to protect yourself or first just to realize that that happens. I think that from my own experience with cancer, I really get what you're talking about, that there's so much feedback, whether it's just a look or a sound or words or tears, from other people, that now that that you're saying this, I see that has such an effect on me and my reality of what was happening. So kudos to you, really, that you had the wherewithal to protect yourself that way. That's really quite extraordinary.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I don't feel the same way now as I did then about how I talk about it. So while I wouldn't want to go into like a whole lot of detail, I feel like now there could be a value in me sharing more specifically, because maybe someone is just receiving a diagnosis that's similar enough, and maybe there's something affirming for them. So
I'll leave that up to you if you want to say anything. No pressure. No pressure. Oh boy.
Yeah. Well, let's go on then and see if it wants to be said.
Okay. All right. Good. From our conversation a month ago, my favorite line, I guess it is, you talked about you're a dancer who wears sneakers. Is that how you say it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I watched something on Vimeo and you held up a sneaker and you said to whoever was, I guess, recording or videoing, you said, "I brought a sneaker." Why don't you tell the story? So you brought a sneaker. Why did you bring a sneaker? What do sneakers mean to you?
Yeah, I brought a sneaker, and the context for bringing a sneaker was I was with a group of artists at what was called an asylum arts retreat, where Jewish artists from around the world gathered. And the assignment, so to speak, was to offer as a gift, like a Jewish artist version of Secret Santa. Like we were to give something to someone. We were to give something to someone and then record a video of why, like what was the significance of this object.
Yes. And you brought a sneaker.
I brought a sneaker, which, I'm not sure if the recipient was
thrilled,
totally delighted to receive a size 6.5 sneaker.
And only one. I mean,
and only one.
Not even a pair. Yeah.
Exactly. But the origin of like why a sneaker, I have been a dancer my whole life. I started in classes when I was 5. I think I made my debut at like the Jewish Home for the Aged in Portland, Maine, doing a very important piece called Feeding the Ducks.
Oh, I can imagine. Adorable.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether I was a duck or a feeder of the ducks, but nonetheless, I was immersed in feeding the ducks. And I grew up dancing, and by the time I was a teenager, I had really discovered modern dance and really devoted myself to it. And in my early 20s, I moved back to New York City. I had gone to college in New York, and then I had gone home to Maine briefly for a couple of years. And then I moved back to New York and really started designing my life around being a dancer. And so I was taking class all the time, doing whatever job I could get to fill in around classes and rehearsals, and learning to become a dance teacher myself. And I started having really intense pain in my right foot at a certain moment. And it took a really long time to get clarity about what was happening.
And how old were you? How old were you when you first experienced the foot pain?
It was in my late 20s.
Okay.
And I just didn't know what I didn't know. And this is going to sound strange, maybe. I have really small feet. And
define small feet.
Well,
What's a small foot?
I'm 5'4", and they're really a size 6. So now they're 6.5 because I wear orthotics, but they're small and I have high arches. So there's like not a lot of surface area. And there were a couple other structural things that sort of all came together to make impact injuries more likely for me. So people often ask me if it's because of dance that I have foot issues. And I don't actually hold it that way. I hold it as structural. I hold it as congenital. I hold it as a little bit inevitable. And I guess I feel very protective about dance around that. I don't know if dance needs my protection, but it felt important to like claim that.
Yes.
So I had this pain, and I went to perform. I was in a company at that time with a wonderful choreographer, Isabel Gotskowski and friends, and I went to Toronto to perform, and I was on crutches all the rest of the time except when I went on stage, And so I was in that experience, and my foot got better, but then the same thing happened to my left foot within a couple years. And I had then MRIs of both feet, and I was studying anatomy then with this brilliant kinesthetic anatomist, Irene Dowd. And She said, your fat pads don't provide you adequate cushion. I think they call it fat pad atrophy.
Oh my gosh.
But yeah, I know. It's horrible. I was like close to 30 years old. By this point, a little older, and it was like, what does that even mean? And what it meant was that the suggestion was to wear special orthotics and sneakers all the time, including when I danced. So this was a very big deal for me.
Yeah.
I want to say that there are many dance forms that include footwear, including sneakers, that are awesome. And my love was to be a barefoot modern dancer. So
did you gave up being a barefoot modern dancer? Were you a sneaker modern dancer?
yes. And so out of that moment, the dancer who wore sneakers and other tales, this big dance piece was born.
Yes.
And I just was like, all right, this is gonna be like a public statement. I am now a dancer who wears sneakers.
Well, I hate that you had to go through all that, but that is what you created out of it is just brilliant. It makes me smile. I'm sure it makes everyone who hears it and gets to see you dance smile just for that. So anyway, it's heartbreaking. It's just heartbreaking that you had to go through all of that. And I think that, it's you transformed a really bad situation into something that's charming and unforgettable.
Thank you.
Wow. So you had fat pad atrophy. I'm just curious about that. I made a note about it.
Well, and what happens with that is like there's the fat pad atrophy part, but the implications are that I have cartilage damage, I have arthritis, that other things that impact registers more. So in and of itself, there's the thing, and then there's the impact of the thing.
Yeah, exactly. So you've been dancing now for how long in sneakers?
I have been dancing for 18 years in sneakers.
Wow.
And I should add that there was sort of another plot twist to the story, which is that about 10 years ago, I started having neuropathic pain in my feet. And so there was a musculoskeletal issue that was managed for the most part, not perfectly, but pretty well by the special orthotics and the sneakers, which are also modified, by the way. Every pair of sneakers I get modified so that they work for my feet. And the introduction of neuropathic pain into my feet was another moment of, oh, okay, how do I? And it's so interesting. I was thinking about this the other day, Cheryl, because so my response to the discovery of impact being a tricky thing for my feet was the dancer who wore sneakers, that I became the dancer who wears sneakers.
Yes.
And then the neuropathy sort of came into my life when I had already started working on a piece called Hineni, which means here I am in Hebrew. And the center of that piece is a scene where one of the dancers is standing on a certain spot and another dancer comes and displaces them. In the first time I shared the piece, it was one male body pushing another male body. The second time, male presenting, I should say. And then the second time it was a female presenting body being pushed by a male presenting body. So, but there was something really essential in the piece about being knocked off one's little piece, like the one space that someone gets to be,
right?
That they get knocked off their space.
Wow.
Yeah. And that has been so much of what I've experienced. Like, if you were looking at me right now, you would see my hands fully extended. If I started out here with my hands at arm's length,
Mm-hmm.
and then coming in halfway to the center of my body when the musculoskeletal stuff started,
Uh-huh.
right? Walking less, jumping less, turning less, but still moving.
Wow.
And then the neuropathy came, and it was another reduction in almost the footprint of my physical impact in terms of how much I walk and weight bear.
Mm-hmm.
And so ever since then, it's been like, how do I work with that in every possible way?
Mm-hmm. In your dance as well as in non-dance times, or
Yeah.
you probably dance most of the time, I'm guessing. I would call your movement dance.
Oh, thank you. I do really believe that. I see walking as an expression of movement. And so
Yes.
one is moving as one walks. There's a rhythm to it. There's a sense to it. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Yes. Oh, that's fantastic. So say that word again.
Hineni.
Hineni.
Yeah.
And what's the definition of hineni?
Here I am.
Ah.
And I took it from the Bible, the Old Testament. It's said numerous times, like there are different passages where, in these kind of archetypal or foundational stories for many people,
Mm-hmm.
for some people, many, there's like, where are you? There's an exchange between God and Abraham about where are you?
Mm-hmm.
There's Isaiah the prophet saying, here I am. Like, there are these moments. And so in the piece, in Hineni, what I did was I had a representation for Abraham, and I had a representation for Moses, and then I had a representation for Jonah. 3 different beings who interacted with the divine in some way, with very different ways of showing up in response to whatever they were being called to do.
Mm-hmm.
Abraham, go to a new land. Go forth. Mm-hmm. I'm on it. Abraham's like, sign me up.
Gotta love Abraham for that.
Gotta love that. So much conviction. So much
yes.
And then we get to Moses, and Moses has kind of a debate with the divine at the burning bush. I'm not really the right person for this. I don't know about this. And there's a back and forth before Moses agrees.
Oh my gosh.
And then Jonah is like, I'm going to get in a whale instead.
I can relate to all 3 of them.
Yeah, me too.
Oh, I love it. Wow.
Yeah, the important thing about that piece, so there was that moment of like being knocked off one space, but the other thing that was important was this real idea of like walking one's own path, mm-hmm. responding to the calling of one's own life, mm-hmm. At your own pace, with your own way of moving, with your own level of reticence or exuberance of moving toward it, but that it's like one's own path to walk.
Yes, I think I've heard you say whether you're ready or not.
Yes, I do say that.
Oh, I can so relate to that in getting starting up with our conversation today. I was not ready. Mm-hmm. And that phrase, ready or not, was in front of me, and I kept looking down at my notes thinking, I don't think I'm ready to do this. And I did. One of the things that I wanted to talk with you about, Sasha, is the work that you do. You do a lot of different workshops and work with people, I think individually too. But I was particularly interested in your workshops on grief. And I'd love it if you just share what those are like? How did you come to do that? What's your experience? Do you still do them?
Yeah, I do still do them. And I have myself been in an exploration of grief for a long time.
Mm.
And I connect with and support and work with a lot of folks who are experiencing grief. And when the pandemic started, I started offering empathy movement workshops on Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted there to be a space that people could gather in community where movement would be accessible if one chose to move, and or meditation, that one could show up in the space in movement and or stillness,
Mm-hmm.
and touch into what's happening inside, and do that in a way that is very honoring of nervous systems. And so empathy movement workshops are a place where there's a monthly theme, and we explore that with words and movement.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the forms it's taken that I have repeated the most of anything I've offered in the last couple of years is mourning, moving, and accompaniment. Mourning, MOURNING.
Let me just interrupt here for a second. Our mutual friend Julia McNeil, she introduced us to each other, and she told me about the mourning and movement workshops. And I thought it was how sweet that you're doing something in the morning. It wasn't until today that I realized you're talking about MOURNING.
Although if one is
Anyway,
in the Pacific time zone, it is also
okay,
in
that's
the
right.
morning.
Yeah, morning
So
times two. Yes.
it's morning times two.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well,
So
there's
tell us about that. Tell me about those.
so I find that for many of us, there are so few places, so few spaces where one can be in grief, not alone.
Mm.
There are many, around death and dying, there are many important and beautiful rituals and ways of holding space in different faith traditions, Buddhist tradition. There's lots of spaces. And the pandemic definitely shifted how communal grieving could happen, especially in the beginning. And even if one hasn't directly lost a loved one or had one's own health impacted,
Mm-hmm.
I think if one is tuning into oneself, one would find grief.
Yes. Wow. Mm.
Yeah. And so something I felt called to contribute was a space for gathering in community to hold grief that doesn't have to be pegged to a specific loss or a specific moment, but really just let someone come in with whatever their heart is carrying.
Yes. Whether they know what it is or not.
Yes.
Right.
And
Yeah.
in fact, often something that happens in that space. The first year I was offering a series of 4 in a row around the loss of a loved one, the loss of a dream, but like I had these specific things, the loss of well-being, the loss of trust, if ever there was it, in a world that is very oppressive to many. Like I had all
Mm-hmm.
these themes. And since then, I haven't done those themes that way because everyone comes with what they come with. And often when you touch one grief,
Mm-hmm.
it
Mm.
associates with other moments of grief that has been stored up for so long.
Yes. Wow. That's very powerful. Hadn't thought about it that way.
Mm.
Do you still teach these workshops?
I do. I have
Mm.
one coming up in August, actually. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, I think I want there to be spaces for people to grieve in community, whether they come in and want to move physically, whether they want to just be internal and sit or lie down in a meditative state, that they get to be in that space. I think it's really important.
Yes, that's incredible. I thank you for doing that. Thank you for
Mm,
being the person who sees that, gets it, and actually supports other people in living through it or working through it or whatever, however you would say,
like maybe
understanding,
being with it,
being
being with
with
it.
it. Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
beautiful. So, you said this phrase to me when we met a month ago, be as I am.
Mm,
And I'd love for you to tell the story of that, how you came to have this place in you that you allowed yourself to be as you were, just to be, with no, what I take from that is no judgment, no regret, that you just allowed yourself to be as you are.
mm,
Would you tell the story of that?
yeah. Well, in some ways, the story of that is very much bound up with my cancer journey.
Mm-hmm.
And I will also say that I am not always successful in being as I am, and that is important to name.
Okay. Okay.
um,
Oh.
I really went into the cancer diagnosis with a lot of self-recrimination. And I realized I was going to need to work with that in order to survive
Mm.
in this really fundamental way. And, earlier you spoke about, and Cancer Talks is so beautiful in being a stand for this, that cancer changes a person.
Mm-hmm.
That experience changes a person and is transformational. And
Mm-hmm.
the opportunity is to become more of who I am. Like
Mm-hmm.
cancer gave me the opportunity to become who I am, who I hadn't fully been embodying
Mm.
before the diagnosis. And while I don't think I embody it fully now, I live my life much more in the direction of being as I am, which is having a lot of, I study interpersonal neurobiology with Sarah Payton, and something she talks about is like holding a sense of warm curiosity for one's own experience.
Mm. Oh, interesting.
And that there's like a real acceptance, like, oh, you're crying right now? Of course you're crying right now. Like a real
Mm-hmm.
spaciousness to be as one is.
Ooh, I think I was demonstrating that. I am demonstrating that today. Oh
Yeah.
my
Well, and
gosh.
what a beautiful thing that you're demonstrating that.
I love that I'm demonstrating that.
Hmm.
Yeah, just for the listeners, I don't know when we got on in my that process, that what was happening with me, but before we started this interview, I was sobbing. I couldn't stop crying, and I didn't really know what it was about, but I so appreciate that you and Claire, who was our producer here, were so accepting of whatever it was that I couldn't put words to, but I don't know, moved and I don't know, a little bit off center. And that's just where I was, when for probably almost an hour before we got on this call together, this interview.
Hmm.
And I mean, now I'm looking at it, I don't feel that way now, but I recognize that that was a big, when you and I talked a month ago, you talked about that way, the be as I am. And, I had personal experience of it.
Hmm.
So I want
Hmm.
to thank you for that.
Hmm. Hmm.
Anyway, you keep going.
Well,
Anything else you want to
yeah,
say?
just
Please keep talking about that.
that these moments can be so isolating. when we're in a big feeling, it can be so isolating, or there can be such a sense of, I'm not presuming this was true for you, but there can be embarrassment, there can be shame, there can be like a feeling that it needs to be shut down.
Okay, all of the above.
All of the above. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh boy.
And I think that's what the empathy movement workshops are really about, that instead of being alone in those feelings, that we get to be held with care. And that there isn't something else that is supposed to be happening.
I love that. There is so much truth to that.
So we get to be accompanied in our grief and in our shame and in our moments of falling short.
Right. Oh my goodness.
Or the perception that we're falling short.
Exactly.
It's not even real.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. Well, thank you for recognizing all of that in me. Wow. Well, we'll close for now. And I mean, what you spoke about, the things that you spoke about were just very, I know they're so meaningful and will mean so much to so many people who hear this.
This conversation is helping me. It's almost helping me integrate the different beats of my journey with my feet, with the neuropathy, with cancer. I feel like when one has gone through something as significant and as culturally significant as cancer, there is this meaning making that arises out of it, or there's an opportunity for this meaning making to arise. And some of it is the being with what is and the being who I am. And some of it is how we turn to each other and we hold space for each other with this warm curiosity, with an intent to accompany.
Beautiful. I love that your version of curiosity is warm curiosity. That's really so sweet. Well, I think let's say see you later, not goodbye.
Okay.
We're not done.
Fair enough. That's great.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Sasha.
Thank you, Cheryl, for talking with me for this time, and also for enabling meaning making to happen amongst all of those of us who are touched by cancer.
If you enjoyed this conversation, please leave a review in your podcast app. Cancer Talks is a platform for anyone who has been touched by cancer. Write to us at info@cancertalks.com if you have a story to share. If you'd like to be in community with other cancer thrivers seeking personal transformation, join us for free workshops on Zoom. Visit cancertalks.com/Zoom to register. If you're moved to donate, please visit cancertalks.com/donate.